Hi, everyone. Welcome to this Wednesday afternoon, in which Dave and I are going to be talking about the very topical. Those of you who are on LinkedIn have probably seen a ton of different posts about Automate 2026, which is going to be taking place in Chicago, US, next week. And so this episode is going to be Dave and I discussing some of our takeaways. We have been there together at least for the last, 4 or 5 years at this point. We have been at different booths. We have done different engagements. We have a series of different events that we're going to be attending the next week. But we also wanted to talk about the experience if you're going to be attending for the first time and talk about some of the engagements that we will be basically engaging in next week so that you know where to find us, where to say hello potentially, but also where to grab certain tickets if you are unfamiliar perhaps with the show. And that's the plan for this episode. So if you're tuning in into the live, don't hesitate to leave us questions for Dave or myself. If you're listening to this in recorded form, which will be posted tomorrow, which is Thursday morning on June 18th, of course, you can also find us at Automate if you're going to be there. Don't hesitate to reach out, send us a message on either LinkedIn, leave us a comment on YouTube, and we will make sure to catch you either during the show or at some of the after the event hours type of events. So, in any case, Dave, do you want to introduce us as to our general schedule and some of the engagements that we will be looking at next week?
Absolutely, Vlad. I'm happy to go ahead and talk about that. Before I do, if you guys are
Mhm.
new to Automate, or if you guys are new to trade shows in general, I have a couple of particular things that I guess suggestions on my side that I
Sure.
I go give out and may be the most beneficial for you guys. So it's a 4 day show. The floor opens at 10 o'clock on Monday. Vlad and I have experienced everything from like a 5 minute wait of you go up and wait. And I don't remember if it was last year or 2 years ago, like we literally waited in line for 90 minutes or 2 hours in order
Mm.
to go ahead and get the registration pass in order to go in. So I would recommend, suggest, and implore you guys to show up early to go ahead and get the pass. And don't hope to go grab your registration pass and walk in immediately at 10 a.m. Speaking of that, if there are particular booth vendors or folks that you want to visit, Monday morning and Thursday are typically the best days to be able to go ahead and see people, in large part because the Tuesday and Wednesday are almost certainly going to be busier. So I
Mhm.
would highly suggest taking a look and leveraging those options if there's someone or someone's that you want to talk to in a larger way. Talking about networking, the best parts for me of these shows are the networking events. A3 puts on a networking event on Monday. It's a 40 or a $45 ticket this year. Vlad and I have been for each of the last 3 years, 4 years, and it's always a good time in order to be able
Mhm.
to go ahead and have some conversations. So I would highly suggest you guys go ahead and take a look at that. Beyond that, Chris Luki and Jake Hall have a manufacturing happy hour, manufacturing champions event that they put on Tuesday. Yep, Tuesday.
Mhm. Mhm.
Would again, if there are tickets left, go check that out on Eventbrite and sign up for that. And then lastly, I'm a big fan of show apps. I feel like the Automate Show app is valuable, if only to say, I am here, I would like to go find this booth. Do I turn left? Do I turn right? Is it on a different floor? Where is this room that the presentation is going to be in? So I typically find those much more helpful and easier to use than a show floor map that may or may not be correct. So I would say
Mhm.
those are my top three suggestions of if you're going. Vlad, on your side, any other particular suggestions or recommendations?
Yeah, I think, over the years, and I wouldn't say it's specific to Automate, but
Mhm.
for trade shows in general, I've gotten a lot better at creating myself a checklist, right? And that has been, incredibly helpful. So for companies as well as individuals that I want to see at the trade show. So in the past, I kept all of that in memory, but now I actually have a spreadsheet and I basically check things off as I go through them. I think it would be interesting. I've not played enough with the app to see if there is this functionality, but I do believe that you can still filter and sort of prioritize exhibitors. I don't know if it allows you to like map your directions better, right? But at least creating that list perhaps is possible within the map. But at least for me, it's been always I research the company, and usually it's individuals that I've met already in the past. You research the company, find the booth number, and then I add it to the spreadsheet, and then throughout the week, I just check off the connections that I have made and that I was
Mhm.
planning. So having some kind of a to-do list, at least for me, has been extremely important because otherwise you're just aimlessly going from booth to booth, and it's very difficult to maximize your time at the trade show that way. Yeah.
Absolutely. I would completely agree. I'm not sure that I've ever been to a trade show, or very infrequently am at a trade show in which I have run out of things to do or people to say.
Mhm.
So I would agree with you, Vlad, going and making those lists and then prioritizing the most possible, or going and setting up meetings before the event. Absolutely 100% top suggestion when it comes to that. Before we talk about Vlad and my particular combined schedule and then our individual items, we do want to say hi to Hank. Hank says he's currently in the air above British Columbia, heading home. Safe travels, Hank. I hope the toolboxes all make it back home. Yeah, I hope the toolboxes all make it back home with you, and that the Air Canada Wi-Fi is better than Vlad's most recent experience. Back to Automate. So, Vlad, you and I have 2 or 3 things that we are doing. That you and I have 2 or 3 things that we're doing together. On the manufacturing hub side, we've got a couple of segments that you and I are shooting. So on Tuesday afternoon, we'll both be at the Siemens booth, which is booth 1214. We'll be there all afternoon, going and shooting some content. So if you guys are looking to say hi or want an introduction to one of the many people on the Siemens side, please feel free to come over and say hi. We had Chris Stevens and Anne Marie Brew on last week on Manufacturing Hub. We talked about what their we previewed a bit of what their keynote is going to look like. So if you guys want a bit of a preview of what the AI is going to be as part of the keynote on Tuesday morning, go ahead and check out episode 264, which was last week with Chris and Anne Marie. And then on Wednesday morning, Vlad and I will be at the Horner Automation booth, which is booth 4303. We're gonna get really deep into some of those conversations we had with Chuck a couple of weeks ago. Chuck Ridgway, episode 263. We dove into some new products. We talked about home automation. We did a little bit of everything. There have been some significant expansions of the Horner automation product line since the last time we had Chuck on. They're no longer just doing all-in-ones. They've got HMIs. They've got CPU units. They're working on a whole bunch of different networking things. And we should probably remind people to go check out Horner Automation and Chuck when he's talked about all of the different networking protocols. Vlad, it's always my favorite memories, not just when you have found your own blog post that you wrote years ago to go solve the problem that you are actively working on, but when you have found a video from our next week's guest to go talk about some particular OT protocol, which you did when we were talking to Chuck ahead of time. And so that will always continue to make me smile. So again, Siemens, Vlad and I will be there Tuesday afternoon, which is booth 1214. And then on Wednesday, we'll be together again in the morning in booth 4303, which is the Horner Automation folks. And if you guys are, well, hopefully slightly less distracted than Hank, currently flying in the air, and going to be at Automate next week, so sadly we'll miss Hank for. We'll go ahead and drop those in the notes, and you guys can, of course, check out either Vlad or my profile. I am sure that information will be posted again as we get sooner to Automate. Having said that, Vlad, you and I also both are spending some time in booths. I'm spending some time in some clients' booths. I've got a presentation, but you have put together a demo. Can we maybe tease the demo, tell people what you're doing, and then I'll tell everyone where to catch me, and then we'll go dive into this demo that you've built as a hopeful expectation of Automate.
Sure. So I will be at the Tiguar, one of my partners' booth, and I will have a space there to present a small demo that I've built, which includes Rockwell PLC that is sending data into an ignition instance that is hosted on one of Tiguar's IPCs. And the goal, I guess, what I was looking to showcase is, I would say, a mix of traditional industrial automation, a little bit of digital transformation, some data collection, but ultimately showcase how you can optimize a production line. In this case, of course, it is a simulation, but something that I have worked on for many different clients in the past, where you have a sequence of different assets and you're trying to figure out where the bottleneck is. You're trying to address some of the faults. You're trying to basically understand how to invest capital for the maximum ROI. So if you are going to be at Automate, if you want to see the demo in person, that's going to be at booth 32022 with Tiguar. Of course, there's going to be other showcases within the booth as well. They're going to be showing their IPCs and their HMI systems. And I do believe that there will be some presence of Tin Manager. Again, a very interesting solution. I was pitched the idea to build out something, I would say, in a relatively short time. I have done applications on Tin Manager in the past. It is certainly a very interesting solution paired with a couple of different tools, but Factory Talk VOC. So if you're curious in any of that, make sure to catch me at Automate in booth 32022. And if you don't see me there, then the plan is going to be to have the hardware in place. I have a video walking through the entire presentation that you can also watch while I'm not there, and obviously see if there are interesting components or pieces that you can pick up on, and just send me a message. We can have a longer discussion. Happy to deliver the presentation on a one-on-one basis.
Awesome. No, that sounds fun. That sounds exciting. I saw a little bit of the very early version of this, and so I'm excited to see what you've built out after you've got a little bit more time and have a better idea of going and delivering this. I would say beyond that, if you guys are at Automate and you're Ignition users, I'd love to go have a conversation. Please shoot me a message. Would like to go ahead and talk specifically about like Ignition logs and diagnostic bundles and the tools that we are putting together to go leverage those. So if you guys are going to be there and are Ignition users, please feel free to come ahead and find me. I would say beyond that, still within the Ignition ecosystem, I've on Monday and kind of mixed throughout the rest of the week will be at the 4IR kiosk, which is in the Ignition ecosystem booth, which is booth 1678. So come find me on Monday, or come say hi to James and Straw and tell them that you are looking for me, this guy, Dave. And come over and say hi if you guys want to know more about Factory Stack and what those managed solutions look like. Beyond that, I am moderating a presentation on Wednesday morning. We kick off at 11:15 a.m. in room S104D. Please don't ask me where that is. I am very hopeful the app is going to tell me when I get there. But we're talking all about software-defined automation and the factory of the future. I've got some folks on the Siemens side who are going to be there, and David Nichols, many-time guest of the show, is also going to be there. So again, software-defined automation and factory of the future, 11:15 in room S401D. And I'm just going to go ahead and drop that in the notes. And we'll go ahead and drop all of these in the chat for you guys to be able to take a look at. Again, if you are listening, please come over and say hi, or shoot Vlad and I a message. We would love to be able to connect with all of our listeners in person. I'm pretty sure we're going to have stickers. We are getting to the very end of the stickers. We will need to do another batch of the stickers soon, but I'm pretty sure Vlad and I have got some stickers if you guys are interested in some Manufacturing Hub stickers as well. Having said that, Vlad, are there other things you're excited about, or you want to go jump into your demo?
Yeah, so I mean, like, look, I'm planning to spend a lot of time at the Tigor booth, right? So for me, it is one of the first times I would say I've always been part of and talked to a lot of exhibitors in general. I will be delivering a technical demo, I would say, of this magnitude for the first time. So I'm trying to figure out, is there going to be some interesting conversations, engagements, right? Both you and I attend different trade shows. I think that we have a good idea of what the profile of individuals is going to be, but I think it's going to be really interesting to see what resonates the most, right? So, again, as I maybe dive into the demo, there's a ton of different components from hardware to software, from PLC programming, all the way to some components of an MES, right? And if I can share my screen, and I guess, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, I had a complete demo which will be posted on the Joltec YouTube channel. So if you're curious on a, I would say, like, more thorough walkthrough and with probably less interruptions and a lot more like technical details, it will be posted by the end of today. But in any case, so what we see in front of you right now is the line overview screen, right? And this is all running on Ignition, which is an instance that I currently have inside of Portainer, which is running on the Tiguar IPC, and that is connected to the Rockwell Compact Logics PLC, into which we're going to look at in just a second. And so the overview screen, right? So this is a pseudo, I would say, HMI slash SCADA system, if you will. Again, of course, all of this is simulated. This is not data that's being pulled from a real facility, but we have a couple of different assets that you would commonly see in food and bev manufacturing, and this is going to be a packaging line. So starting from the filler, we have then the capper, labeler, case packer, and palletizer. And by the way, Dave, feel free to interrupt me, and if there's people in the chat, don't hesitate to ask any questions as they come up. So you see the five assets, you see inputs and outputs to every asset. This is a linear flow, meaning that the filler feeds into the capper, the output of the capper feeds into the labeler, so on and so forth, until we have a pallet of finished goods. We have the status of every machine, right? So in this case, we have three faulted machines: the capper, labeler, and palletizer. We have a case packer that is starved, and we have a filler that is backed up. Obviously, I can go into a long monologue explaining some of the states, but this gives you a representation of your line as a process. So let's do something really quick so we can actually see something run, right? So if I go into my line fault log, I can see the three assets. We have the palletizer, capper, and labeler have a fault, and all of them are critical. Again, you can obviously change these inside of your Ignition instance and designer. What I can do here is I can acknowledge all the fault. They will become active but acknowledged, because ultimately the faults still reside within the assets. So we can proceed to clear the faults, in which case they should disappear. We will see that the assets are now stopped instead of being faulted, and at which point I can start the line. And what we should see is that every asset, or for the most part, will begin to run. And the states, going back to that comment, is going to depend on where the bottleneck lies. So in this case, again, immediately visually, we can see that the case packer is transitioning between being starved and being running. And the reason for that, of course, is the case packer is waiting for 6 bottles coming out of the labeler to complete the full unit, but it is running faster than the labeler is able to supply it with bottles. And so as you're approaching this demo, right? So I've obviously worked on quite a few features. You can, for example, go into the machine, right? There's going to be graphics for individual machines, and you can adjust, for example, the simulation settings, right? So the case packer, you can slow it down, for example, and again, this is going to write back to the PLC. So the machine, as you will see basically here, applying glue or folding the case, is going to be slower than it was previously, right? So you can make these adjustments for every machine. At this point, you will notice that everything is starting to be starved, right? And that's because we are lacking the raw materials on certain equipment. Dave, any questions? I know that I'm monologuing and explaining this a little bit, but I know that you've also seen these applications, so this shouldn't be anything groundbreaking, at least for you. What are your thoughts?
Vlad, I have to say that this might be the earliest you've ever brought me into a conversation on Manufacturing Hub. So thank you for that. I was fully
Yep.
prepared, as was the audience, for a
Just
45-minute monologue
fades
as I'm
away.
over
Just
as I'm over here waving my arms and then just slowly falling down. But no,
yeah.
so I think it looks really good. I like the line overview screen. I like the line overview screen. I guess so. First question is, you said
Yes.
you've got the Tiguar IPC that is running your ignition gateway.
Correct. So I guess to expand on that a little bit, right? So I have Ubuntu 26 loaded
Hmm.
onto the Tiguar IPC. Then I have Portainer as shown here. I
Hmm.
have several containers, right? So obviously Portainer is in its own container. Then you have Ignition 8.3, Ignition 8.1, and you have MariaDB, which is a fork of MySQL database to store the alarm logs, right? So right now we are basically accessing this Ignition 8.3 instance, right? As you can see over here on the top, and that's where we have the gateway. And then we have the actual project within the gateway.
Okay, very nice. And then so you said all of your data is coming directly from Compact Logics, or I guess
Correct.
what famous Solus PLC hardware can we all expect there to be in the booth with you?
Sure. So well, I guess there's a couple of things, right? So if we go into Ignition, and obviously you may have already seen this before. So here inside of devices, we have a connection to the PLC. As I will explain in the presentation, right? So right now we're connected to one PLC. There is obviously an option, and again, you may know this, but not everybody knows. There's the opportunity to connect different controllers, multiple controllers, right? On the Rockwell side, there's going to be different versions. You have new Siemens drivers that have been released with 8.3. You can
Mm-hmm.
connect to Mitsubishi, you can connect to an OPC server, you can connect to an MQTT broker, you can connect to Omron PLCs, right? So there's a lot of different options, but I guess for this specific demo, there is a single PLC, which is the Rockwell Compact Logics. And again, I think it's going to take too much time to go through the logic, but as you can see here, I am online with the PLC, and it has all the logic associated with the filler, the capper, the labeler, case packer, the palletizer, and of course anything that has to do with the HMI interface to and from ignition.
No, no, very cool. Very cool. I We certainly do not need to go through your lines of ladder logic. I would say if we keep this up very much longer, we may have a mysterious Tim Wilborn appear and start commenting on your lines of ladder logic.
Mhm.
So you've got the line overview. You have each of the particular segments of the line
Mhm.
that have their own graphics and visual representations. I think that's very cool. What else can we expect to see?
So I think again, going back to my original statement, right? There is a demonstration of control system design here, right? So you can
Mhm.
control the actual like assets, if you will. So you can change the speed, you can change the rates, you have indicators for different either warnings, but also you're able to interact with the line, right? So based on how you change some of those set points, it will produce faster or slower or create different bottlenecks depending on set points. The other interesting feature is, of course, the faults, right? So I've gotten this feedback from a couple of individuals, including you, which was to have some fault functionality. And so the
Mhm.
way I've set this up, and again, I don't know if I want to pull up the entire like designer, but basically every asset has 10 random faults.
Okay.
And what you can do is, so if you go into the palletizer, you can adjust the random fault min max randomizer,
Okay.
which basically, so it allows you to select what is the random window, right? And so to explain this a little bit clearly, so if it's 180, 180, it means that every time, or I guess once this palletizer runs for 3 minutes, it
Hmm.
will get one of those 10 random faults, right?
Okay.
if you set, for example, this max at, and again, you can play around with this however you'd like, it will get one of the random faults within this window, right? So between 554 seconds to 995, right? And this is logic that is written both in ignition as well as on the PLC side. It will throw a random fault out of the current set of faults. And of course, the faults are just random, but they are related to the palletizer, right? So, for example, right now, we see that the robot suction cup pressure is low, right? So it's unable to pick the next case. In a real world scenario, this is something you would hopefully have as you're picking and placing these cases, right? And so, as I've demonstrated before, you can select the alarm, you can acknowledge, um, you should be able to clear faults and reset back to the PLC, and you should be able to. You see it. It is no longer faulted. You can start the machine, and it will proceed with placing the next case back on the stack. And again, for this simulation, we can just increase the speed so it's a little bit easier to see. You see,
Yeah.
there's nice animations for
Okay.
the pallet that's getting stacked, and it's going to stack all the way up
Okay.
to 45 um, cases. And so once again, there's logic, right? So once we adjust the defaulted state, now that it's running, it's going to take that window and randomly fault out
Hmm.
within that window on one of the faults. But we'll
Okay.
see that it will get, for example, to 45 cases on this pallet,
Yep.
and it is backed up as one would expect, right? So someone needs to take away the pallet. Again, in the real world, it could be a conveyor. In some cases, it could be a forklift, right, that needs to breach, let's say, the safety guard. But ultimately, it is waiting for that condition to. It is waiting for the pallet to clear before it starts another pallet. So here, again, for the simulation purposes, you can just press on clear pallet, and it's going to restart the cycle again. It's going very fast because we've cranked up the speed of the machine.
Yeah. I think that's really cool. So I've got several questions. I will say to the chat, if you guys are watching live and have questions for Vlad, please let us know. But I guess my kind of top question is: you're showing off some hardware, you're showing off some PLC programming, some HMI programming, some
Mhm.
ignition programming, and again a whole hardware and tech stack. Excuse me, in conjunction with that, who are you most looking to talk to? I guess if there was an ideal user out there who's listening right now and is going to be at Automate, who should come over and see you at the Tigwar booth, Vlad?
Yeah, so I would say it is anyone from a engineering manager and ultimately engineer as well, all the way up to a decision maker who is executing either integration projects on the SCADA MES side, but also all the way down to again traditional industrial automation.
Mhm.
We are showcasing very specific partners, but of course, depending on what your needs are, we can work with other software suites as well as hardware as well. But ultimately, I will be explaining as to why we have selected this specific hardware, where my experience or our experience ultimately lies, what we're capable of supporting, what we cannot support, right? So there's going to be delineations. But I guess to answer your question, anyone that's interested in industrial automation, digital transformation, industry 4.0, again, I know that this is not a data heavy application, but we're more than capable of having the conversation around UNS, about data lakes, about data storage, and ultimately deriving some analytics and presenting some key findings from plant floor data.
No, I think that's awesome. I'm very excited to one go watch the full demo and walkthrough that you have. When that goes live on the Joltech YouTube channel, I am sure that we will go ahead and update the show notes for that. And I'm really excited to go ahead and see the feedback that you get. I am also candidly really excited to see how your feet feel after 3 days of presenting for the first time in your entire life. Vlad, please remember to go bring some cough drops and a water bottle. You are absolutely going to go need it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Of course. Um, Beyond that, Vlad, any
Mhm.
other highlights or other things that you are looking forward to at Automate that is worth discussing for our listeners?
Yeah, so again, I'm reflecting back on my experience on
Mhm,
some of the first Automate shows that you and I have done, right? I have a much more succinct list, I would say, of things that I would like to see. I am involved in various projects, right? So I'm going
mhm,
to be looking at a couple of different vendors, right? And some of them are friends of the show, have been on the
mhm,
show. Some of them are, I would say, a little bit novel even to me, but because there is a project need, I will do
mhm,
my best to spend at least a little bit of time, sort of like pass by and look at some of their solutions, right? And of course, you've already mentioned that we will be together with Siemens and
mhm,
Horner Automation. I think there's going to be a ton of interesting things to see. I know that Siemens has quite a lineup on which we always do our best to catch up, but there's always something new, always something very impressive and cutting edge. I am very curious, with them. I do have a couple of projects where, again, I'm looking at very traditional automation. I'm looking to connect with some
mhm,
experts on industrial IO lines that they have on their G2 120 series of
mhm,
VFDs. I'm trying to understand some of the key differences. I'm also looking at some of their scale-in switches, right? So for networking purposes. And of
mhm,
course, we did talk to some of their cybersecurity folks. I do believe that they have some solutions on that side that would be interesting. Horner Automation, again, we've talked to them. They have a lot of building automation systems. They have a new PLC, which is very cost effective. So curious to see both of those demos. And I think they've announced a couple of other products. Again, I don't think
mhm.
we got all of the information.
I
So
don't think
there's
we did.
yeah, so I'm very excited on that side. But beyond Siemens and Horner, there's a couple of mentions, that I will make really briefly. So software defined automation, again, an interesting solution. I have been trying to figure out a good way of backing up PLCs, but also making sure that everything in especially large project deployments, and especially, I recently ran into a project where there's quite a few older PLCs, and if you've done a lot of Rockwell, you will know exactly what I'm talking about because there are no comments stored in the program. So, of course, when you have a bunch of, I would say, younger engineers that are eager to make changes, it becomes difficult to keep track of. So, I am looking
Yep.
at a couple of solutions on that side. Then, of course, you've already mentioned inductive automation, right?
Mhm,
So I build on ignition. I have recently, and I think I've mentioned this on the podcast, completed the core certification that I've lapsed from way back when and will be going for the gold in the short future. There's Opto 22, right? Again, they will be together with inductive, but
mhm,
obviously always a pleasure to reconnect with their team. Phoenix Contact, and I'll mention the rest, I guess, like very quickly, right? So Phoenix Contact, we have Festo, Omron, Kians, Cognex, and Rice Lake weighing systems. And once again, a lot of these are for project purposes,
mhm,
right? I have systems that utilize some of their solutions. So I'm just looking to establish, and again, this goes back to our initial comment of what is the purpose for some of these trade shows.
mhm,
Sometimes you can establish an in-person connection with some of these companies to then have either support or a more direct point of contact on some of these projects. So I'm
mhm,
curious to see their solutions, but also talk to some of the people at those booths to make sure that I know who to reach out to in case of issues, in case of need of
mhm.
support, right, or just general questions about their products.
No, I think that's fantastic. So I've got a couple of comments on that, but we actually have a
Mhm.
question in the chat from Hank. He's
Mhm.
asking if your demo, Vlad, is perspective or vision. I imagine it's perspective.
It is perspective, but surprisingly, I do have a very large customer that's building everything in Vision. So I've also been spending quite a bit of my time on the Vision side. Again, I've built mobile apps in the past, so I definitely prefer perspective. But I do now see where Vision shines, right? And I think a lot of the process, sort of like automation, vision makes a little bit more sense. Like when you start to build piping and tanks, and you have P&IDs to design, it is a little bit easier in vision, I would say. But my demo specifically with Tiguar is going to be in perspective. And I can again, like, I guess during next week I will have all of this pulled up so that people can actually see and play around with the implementation, but I can pull up the designer with all of the pages.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I I think that's good. I would also say, chat, and friends of the show, if we go back to 4 or 5 years ago, looking at the list of all of the places Vlad wanted to see, I'm pretty sure he just manually copied and pasted something like 95% of the booths over from the major list on the website over to our shared Excel spreadsheet. So I'm very happy, Vlad, that you are getting a bit more particular in the groups and how you're going to attempt to spend the time. Because I feel like most of the time it's like Wednesday afternoon and you're like, I've made it through the top 5 and I'm missing the next 30,000 booths. And I have no idea how we're going to go do that. So I would say moderation is absolutely a good suggestion of, I want to go do these things. Again, if you're someone like Vlad who's got 10 booths that you're trying to get to, if you know someone in the booth, go and set up a time and attempt to go set up a meeting either during the exhibition show hours or before or after the exhibition show hours is the best use of what you guys can probably do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Look, for me, some of these visits are going to be stretch items, right? Again, I know a lot of the people from those companies. I've talked to them before. None of this is going to be a brand new connection. So I do have some contacts at the booth, and it's kind of a, like I said, a milestone, hopefully, to get to all of them, but not a necessity per se. I think there's just going to be, as you said, a lot going on every single day. So it will be a plus if I get to see them, but if not, obviously we'll schedule some other times to connect and have those conversations.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think this is fantastic. I guess, Vlad, this may be the shortest show we've had in a while. Any other thoughts or comments, or should we make this a particularly concise episode for folks who are going to see us at Automate, or maybe won't see us at Automate next week?
I will say, kind of as a closing thought, at least on my side, right? If you find me, at least, you can get one of these stickers, right? So we have the new second version of the manufacturing hub stickers, and you can also get one of these sweet rulers that
Ooh.
are super useful, but also contain some like funny jokes and comments about manufacturing and industrial automation. So come find me at the Tigor booth at Siemens on Tuesday afternoon, Horner Wednesday morning, or just send me a message and we'll find some time to connect.
Absolutely. I love it, Vlad. I guess follow-up question on those rulers. Do they come with magnifying glasses? Because those are some very tiny, very particular and specific words. I'm going to go get my jeweler's loop.
Unfortunately, those are not provided. It is a bring your own magnifying glasses, but that is by design. There's some Easter eggs hidden in, font 0.5 on some of these rulers.
Maybe next time, Vlad, it's a 2-part giveaway. If someone comes and sees us first and they get a ruler, someone comes and sees us second and they get a magnifying glass so they can read the ruler.
I like it. We'll make it happen.
I like it too. But no, guys, everyone, thanks for tuning in. Hank, have a safe flight home. My last thoughts, again, if you guys are Ignition users, come find me or shoot me a message. Would love to go have a chat and a conversation next week. I guess as a couple of final notes for our listeners, Vlad and I are going to be off, at least off live for 2 or 3 weeks as we have Automate coming up, and then there's Canada Day, and then the 4th of July. And so we'll be off live for a couple of weeks, but I imagine in 2 weeks we'll have an episode for you guys from the conversations that we've had live at Automate. Until, I suppose, until we see some of you guys live in person next week. We'll see